Fall camp is right around the corner, and there's going to be some fun position battles over the next month.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hansen. He's site editor with Athlon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen today, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stuff sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, Lars, happy Monday. We've got a really fun show for the everydayers out there. We're going to talk a little bit of recruiting, some in the secondary, still celebrating some of that Dylan Robinson news. And we're going to talk about our Mount Rushmore of Husky football. We're going to have some fun on this show, but we're going to get to that after some of the most important position battles that you and I are going to be watching this fall, because fall camp is closing in quickly. And where do you want to start here? We've got a couple fun ones for the everydayers.
Let's start amongst everyone's favorite position, the offensive line, and probably where everything matters. Well, there's two positions that really, really matter: left guard or left tackle and center. Let's start at the heart of the line with center, because it's the one that we have the most understanding about in terms of the guys that are on the roster. D'Angelo Titialihi, the Portland State transfer, coming in as a 2-year player, potentially, obviously coming in as a veteran transfer to play with Landon Hatchett coming back from his injury. So for all the everydayers, remember, Landon could play this year, but the expectation going into camp, it would be unjust to say, hey, Landon is going to be competing for the starting job in fall camp. He should, and in any other situation he would, but this is why you go and get the veteran transfer TTLE. And the reason why I like this position, or the reason why I like the addition of TTLE, is because if some of these other guys that we're going to talk about at center emerge, you can kick him over to right guard or left guard, depending on who wins either of those two spots, because he has significant game reps at both of those positions. More so, I believe, at left guard. But either way, when I talked to him after he committed, he said he's comfortable playing center guard. Pretty interchangeable. Obviously, he's not going to, the one position he's not going to play is tackle. So that's the safe pick right there. But I think, especially when you're looking at who could be the quarterback and just how the offense is going to run, I like Zach Henning, and I like what he could be in the future. I like him more so as potentially a guard tackle, but he did look decent at center. I also like what Michael Watkins can do in the future in that regard. And obviously Landon would be the expected center starter if it wasn't for TT Lee. But just having that veteran presence, I think when you look at whether it's DeMond or whether it's Will Rogers, the quarterback, it's better to have a veteran center under kind of directing traffic, leading the offense, setting up the offense. And it honestly helps everybody else around him, with whether it's going to be, one or two redshirt freshmen around him, depending on tackle or guard, however those spots work out. You're going to need somebody that has a veteran presence. And although it's not at the Power 4 level, he clearly knows, and actually his best game was at Husky Stadium in Portland State in 2022. So he knows how to handle big moments. He's not afraid, in that regard. So I think having just an experienced center is kind of why I wanted to touch on the center to begin with.
So I really like your thought process there. I'm going to leave that one for you, and I'm going to switch over to left tackle there, because you're right. That is something we need to make sure we mention in the same conversation. And I really do see it right now as a 3-person race, the way you really want to look at it. I kind of left Elisha Jaquette out of this conversation, just mainly due to his weight, where I think he still needs to add some more mass to his frame before he's really ready to compete in this conversation. I'm really curious to see what Soane Fasolo can do in terms of just what his technique looks like, and if it's been able to improve from the spring to the fall, where we saw some nice moments out of him as well as he trained on both the left and right side. But if he can really show some improvement with his technique, with his hand fighting, then I think that he could be a contender here. But the two guys that I have, just in terms of who I'm watching, are Maximus McCree and Justin Hilkema. Where Justin Hilkema, I know I've praised him before as, even as a true freshman. I think that I really like where he's at, just in terms of, obviously, 6'8", 323. You can't teach that. That's crucial right there. You love to see that. But I also just think he's a really nice mover for that size. And if he can show to be an adequate pass protector, I don't think he needs to be a great protector, But if he can be an adequate one early on, and obviously Jedfish is okay with him taking some licks early and just seeing how that works out. If he can show that he can do that, that he's gonna be a really strong contender. And especially with a guy like McCree, who, Lars, you've talked to, you've shared his backstory over on Athlon Sports, with all the readers need to go check out as well. If he can show that he's back in football shape after having to take last year off and take a regular job and do everything it is that he did, if he can prove that he's in football shape and in, the shape that won him junior college All-American 2020 and 2021, that got him to transfer to Maryland and saw him some action there, then he's going to be a strong contender. And I think that he's a real sleeper in terms of, what the Big Ten has talked about nationally. And I don't think this is going to be an elite offensive line. Let's be real. It's probably not going to be Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. I know it's a shocker, but I think this group has the potential to be solid to above average. And if it can do that, it raises the ceiling of this offense tremendously.
I completely agree. And I think actually the one thing to hit on before we switch sides and talk about some defensive position battles is the addition of McCree. While, again, I like him, we both like him and all that, it's not an impact, immediate plug-and-play transfer if you're getting say a 2-year starter from a Power 4 school. Like, let's say you get Michigan State's starting left tackle, or Drew Azzopardi on the right side, for example, where he's not Drew Azzopardi is an absolute plug-and-play. That opens the door for Swan and Fasolo, and potentially he'll come up to earn those reps, because you're looking at the right side thinking, okay, there's no one barring injury is going to push for that job. The left side, McCree could earn it, but just as well the other two could earn it, which is a similar perfect segue to the cornerback position that I want to talk about, where we have Elijah Jackson, you have Thaddeus Dix. I'm curious also to throw Jordan Shaw in the mix. I know he saw a lot of time at nickel, but I think his ball skills are going to make some interesting decisions for John Richardson in that regard. And I'm more or less just curious how the cornerback 2 battle plays out, because we know what Price Hawk is going to be on the right side or left side, whichever field of play you're looking at the cornerback 1 spot. That cornerback 2 spot, you have 2 guys that are both 6'1", 6'2", depending on which height we want to really believe here. And they've both shown well, but neither of them, and I know we both have our different agendas here, have never put it together for an entire full season, and especially not in the Big Ten. So when you look at what not just Ohio State, because obviously they don't play Ohio State this year, but just what the Big Ten receivers tend to do and tend to look like, you really need to have a physical guy, where in that regard, I do think Thaddeus might have a little bit better luck in that regard. But I do think Elijah Jackson, especially what he showed in the Sugar Bowl, he's not going to back down from that easily. And so I'm just curious, how do the snaps end up breaking down, and how does the alignment break down? Because you have 2 guys who arguably should be cornerback 2. Do you kick one into nickel? Do you kick one back to safety? I'm just curious, how does it all come together? Because you're going to have to play both those guys a significant amount.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I really like the way Thad fits in this defense because of his aggressive play style, and because of just I feel that we saw the most improvement from him out of any cornerback during spring practice. That was something that I felt that I saw from him, but Elijah was excellent. I feel Elijah also got a lot better. And it's something we've talked about throughout his entire tenure. Before this show existed, when we're sitting up in the press box, that was always the thing with Elijah, is he's an elite athlete. And if he can put it together, if he can stay healthy, that he has the potential to be a top cornerback. And the last one we want to get to here is the most confusing one that I would say, and it's the edge 2 spot. I've gone on record as saying I think that it's going to be Deshaun Lynch who takes the job, mainly because of his size. He's up to 292 on Washington's roster right now, and just ability to set the edge. But it's going to be Deshaun Lynch versus Voitanufi versus Jaden Wayne versus Jacob Lane versus Lance Holtzclaw versus Maurice Himes versus Isaiah Ward versus Russell Davis versus who else I left out there, where it's going to be really confusing. And we know Zach Durfee is probably going to be the starter on the other side of the ball, and everything behind them is very fluid. So if throughout any point in the summer we've left 1 or 2 edge rushers off of a discussion like this, it was not intentional. It's because there are so many guys and we don't know what their roles are all going to look like. And it's so interchangeable, and there's so much that could happen there. And I would say that's the one I'm probably the most intrigued to watch, but it's because it's the most confusing and we don't know how that's going to turn out, because there's so many different outcomes that could happen there. And Lars, that being said, there are so many different outcomes that you could also have for Washington's Mount Rushmore. which we'll get to right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball, and I'm going to just keep hyping him up because I love watching Paul Skeens pitch so much. I think I'm just going to call it right now that I think he's going to win the National League Cy Young Award, and you can still go get some nice odds over on that on FanDuel. You should go check that out because just watching that guy pitch is special, man. He's going to be one of the best pitchers in the league for a very long time. So, Lars, when you think about the Mount Rushmore of Husky football, you can, and this is shout out to UW football, the admin over on social who put this out on Twitter, Instagram, everywhere else the other day. It really got both of us thinking, where there are a lot of different ways you can take this. And you and I had a discussion before the show, like, hey, do we want to caveat this as just in our lifetime? We were kind of like, yes, but also no, because, you know, we don't want to leave off a guy like Steve Entman or, you know, the potential of like a Napoleon Kaufman or a Warren Moon or a Hugh McElhaney. Like, obviously, there's so many different ways that you can have this conversation. So you have yours, because we both came up with our own, where we wanted to kind of make one, but we thought it'd be better to, you know, give you two different trains of thought here. So who do you have?
I mean, I think, you know what, I'm not a big fan of it just because, like you mentioned with the caveat, we would be remiss if we didn't start with Steve Entman, just because of everything that he represents for the university. One of the number one overall pick, was the closest guy to a Heisman before Michael Penix. And I think, even though obviously I know he has been around the program somewhat last year, as the program is making the national championship run, I just think it's more or less symbolic of what he represents, where he doesn't have to be a guy that's, you know, always around the program or doing everything like that. Because when you think of Washington football, if you were to poll people across the country, you'd say you poll 1,000 people across the country, who's the first name that comes to your mind when you think of Washington football? There's at least a decent majority, maybe not a, you know, plus 50% of that, but a solid number are going to say Steve Entman. And I think that's just important to say, because when we talk about guys like Vita Vea and everything like that, obviously there's two different players, but one did kind of lay the foundation for the other. And obviously Vita would never say, oh, I came to Washington to be the next Steve Entman. But when you are the guy that said, well, whoever is that Steve Entman, you have to put him in the Mount Rushmore in that category, because anytime you're saying, hey, like, which we'll talk about with a quarterback down the road, I want to be the next so-and-so. I want to be the next so-and-so. Well, the only reason people want to be the next guy is because of who the first one was, and that's why Steve Entman gets the first nod.
So I couldn't agree with you more there, and that's why Steve Entman is on mine as well. And I just a little anecdote from being down there at the national championship, because you're right, he's not somebody who's always around the program anymore, or ever was really. And, you know, I'm not faulting him for that, because everybody has their own choices. Everyone can do their own thing. But I remember I was walking back up to the press box and walking through one of the tunnels down there in Houston, and I passed by him. We kind of bumped into each other. I was like, I just, the aura that still comes off him, just seeing him in Husky purple, just seeing him just do everything. And even though it's been so long, it was before I was born, like that's when Steve was doing his thing. It's the aura and everything is still there and still surrounds him when it comes to Husky football. So I thought that was really cool. And I wanted to include a receiver on this list. I had to include a receiver on this list. And so I was between I feel that there were three choices, or no, there were four. And the fourth one I feel is mainly because of just how much I loved watching him during his era of Husky football. That's John Ross. John Ross was unfortunately the first guy that I cut. The next one that, you know, you obviously have to include there is Mario Bailey. Mario Bailey, unfortunately, also got the axe, and I'm not joking. I have it right here where I have both these names, and I have yet to make a decision. So this is me live in the decision-making process and totally putting off choosing between Reggie Williams and Rome Odunze, because I don't feel you can go wrong either way. And I You know what? I'm doing it. I'm going with Rome Odunze here, and I don't want to slight Reggie, who obviously still has plenty of accolades and still outranks Rome in several categories as well. But with what Rome did for the program, what I feel that he's going to do in the NFL, I feel that is a really great representation of what the university is going to be about. Where, in 5-10 years, if we look back and Rome, it's something I wrote about over on Huskies Wire, if Rome has a similar career to Keenan Allen, do you think that that's not something that you can sell to every single wide receiver recruit who wants to come to UW? Hey, come be the next Rome Odunze. Hey, come be the next Rome Odunze. And not just on the field, with who he was off the field. Lars, with all the times you've talked to him, with all the times I've talked to him, I have never, come away with any other feeling than that was an incredibly wonderful, honest, genuine human being to talk to, just about whatever the conversation might have been. I remember you and I have had conversations with him about gelato, about traveling internationally, about so many different things. And just from, what my memories in 10, 15 years will be from the 2023 season, Rome has such an integral part of that he's somebody that I need to put on this list. So he's got my number 2 spot.
Yeah, again, you could not go wrong with either of those choices. And I think obviously what would probably seal it, and this is no slight to Reggie, it's just the impact moments that Rome had, the Oregon touchdown, the Wazoo run.
Yeah.
Again, bizarrely enough, did all those great things. Wasn't the only receiver to catch a touchdown in the semifinal of the national championship game. Guess who that went to? Jalen McMillan. So again, that's why we can put Rome up there. So I'm glad you took a recent player, because I got a couple recent guys that I'm going to say, but I'm going to pivot back to an old timer. I went defensive line. I would be remiss if I didn't go to Lincoln Kennedy. Give me a good.
I'm glad you got him on here.
Give me a good, solid, legendary left tackle. And the other thing, and again, this is why I want to tie him and Edmond together, because there's 2 impactful alumni, 2 Mount Rushmores for UW athletics, and they've both gone about their post-UW career in different ways. Lincoln Kennedy, obviously working with the Pac-12 network, formerly great ambassador. I remember he was down at the Alamo Bowl with his son when I had a photo with him and Kalen DeBoer and Lincoln Kennedy's son, and what could have been there, but hopefully Jed will pick that one up on the back end. But just when you have a kind of, nobody ever really, I haven't heard a bunch of recruits say, oh, I want to be the next Lincoln Kennedy, I want to be this and that. But I think it more or less speaks to the aura of what the offensive line became when you talk about, guys over the years. And obviously with his latest class, Roger Rosengard and Troy Fautano, these are kind of like the next way. I'm not saying they are going to be Lincoln Kennedy-esque, but I think it started back then, so we couldn't really think of another offensive tackle to put in the mix without going even further back or cheapen it, because there's no way you can leave Lincoln Kennedy off of this list. I don't think you can do that.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. There's no way you could. So I feel we have one similarity on our list, because there were a lot of great quarterbacks you could choose from. I got my whole thought process here of obviously Jake Browning, career leader in everything. He deserves to be mentioned. I'm going to go through all the honor mentions that we definitely both have. Warren Moon, Sonny Six Killer. Personally, when I was growing up watching the Huskies, the first quarterback I ever watched was Cody Pickett. Like Marcus Tuiasosopo, the Hewards, Billy Joe Hobart. I want to make sure I name all these guys, because I don't want any of them to feel left out, or for the everydayers to feel that we left these guys out, because it was so hard. But at the same point, it's so hard to not choose Michael Penix. And one of the reasons that I say that is not only the accolades, everything, when you look at his career numbers, think about that he did all that in 2 years, where, obviously you look back at what his career was at Indiana with the injuries and everything, but think about what a full, healthy career, especially if it all happened at Washington, could have looked like. He would be the career leader in everything, and putting Washington on the map, back on the map, really is what you should say, taking them to the national championship, winning a CFP playoff game, finishing second in the Heisman voting. You can't leave this guy off. There's no world where Michael Penix does not deserve a spot on this list.
No, you're 100% wrong. And I think just, there's nothing I can say.
Oh, I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong in that regard. So I'm just going to say everything you agree with, and I'm going to give you my 4th, which is a little bit of a surprise. Please. And I wasn't sure. wasn't sure I was going to do this, but you hit something. You said a couple of words right there that made me justify the pick, and that's Budda Baker. Because of what he did to put Washington back on the map. This isn't going to be was he the greatest Washington defender in Husky history? No. But, I mean, he's certainly, for what he did and the way he played and everything like that and what he represented, obviously coming to Oregon, flipping late, signing with Washington, do everything like that. And then you think about the other DBs that spawned in the state. Kyler Gordon went on King 5 and announced that he was staying home and choosing Washington over Notre Dame. You can go through the list of guys, and how many guys, when they get a Washington offer as a DB, put out a Budda Baker photo. Some guys obviously put out Marcus Peters. I think if we did picking a Mount Rushmore of attitudes when it comes to Husky players, Marcus Peters is a dog. So like that, Marcus Peters would be on my dog Mount Rushmore, but Budda Baker would get the nod as just for everything that he represented for the university. And the other thing, absolutely killed it in the league ever since. So this isn't a case of, hey, he was a great Husky, but didn't end up panning out in the NFL or anything like that. He continued that on, built that legacy. And think about, you got Tony Parrish, you got other legacy defensive backs, Deshaun Goldston. There's so many guys that we could go through in that regard. But just, again, like we said in the beginning, our lifetime, a little more closer to the Budda Baker era for myself than I am to Tony Parrish. Although I've gotten to touch Tony Parrish, so I respect Tony Parrish for what he did. But I would just give me Budda Baker to round out my top board.
I like that a lot. So one safety that I don't fault you for not mentioning him, but a personal favorite of mine growing up, Sean Parker. I was a huge Sean Parker guy during his era with the Huskies. I love watching that guy play. So I took a little bit of a different route here, where I want to think about this with just people that impacted me growing up watching the Huskies, which, as the everydayers know, which I like to talk about, is something that my dad and I have shared for my entire life. And so I put a lot of thought into this, where, I thought about Keith Price. I thought about Myles Gaskin. I thought about John Ross, Dante Pettis, Shaq Thompson, Danny Shelton, a couple of guys that you've already mentioned. I just want to, throw some different names in here of just guys that I really enjoyed watching. Sidney Jones. And I really just had to go with a guy that just spawned what this has turned into for us. Because the first guy that I think about is somebody who's not only my favorite Husky of all time, but somebody who was so impactful on the field and has been so impactful in terms of what we've been able to turn Locked On Huskies into. And something that I'm really lucky to talk about when it comes to Huskies Wire and everything else is I started my writing career a lot because I just want to talk about Vita Vea during the draft process. That was a whole lot of it, where I loved watching him. I loved watching this Huskies team for so long. And Vita was always my guy. And that he's just somebody who I feel like, obviously he's not going to be like, he doesn't deserve to not be mentioned on this. I know he wouldn't be a lot of people's pick, but I will always have a special place in my heart for Vita Vea's career at Washington. And I can't not choose him here. He has to be my guy there. And Lars, that was a lot of fun. And with that being said, Washington's having a lot of fun on the recruiting trail, and they might be able to pull in 2 more elite defensive backs in the next couple of weeks. So let's start with a little bit of the news that I can't say you or I are surprised by is, as we're recording this on Sunday, July 21st, some crystal balls have rolled in for LaRue Zamorano, the 3-star defensive back, who did visit on the June 21st weekend to choose Michigan State after they had originally been coming in for Washington. Feels like, following the Dylan Robinson news, this isn't necessarily surprising now that there are 3 cornerbacks in this class. And that's just kind of the way the numbers have worked out, especially because Lars, Washington is still looking at taking a couple guys in the back end of the defense. And the 2 names that you and I are looking very closely at are 4-star Ladarian Clarity and 3-star Ryland Dillard-Allen. And both those guys would be just massive gets for this program.
And I think what it represents is it also represents going coach to coach with recruiting, because you go down to the state of Arizona and potentially, again, have to caveat all this with potentially, because we don't want to spoil any moments or insinuate anything that might not actually come true. But more likely than not, I wouldn't be surprised to see Ryland Dillard-Allen end up at Washington. When you get a guy from Arizona, that's a good get. But going across the country to the Sunshine State, with all those Florida schools offering. Now, granted, Washington and Vinny Cincinnati ended up offering them more than half the Power 4 public schools in the state of Florida, which is bizarre in its own right. So do with that what you will. But it's still a significant victory because he did. Clarity did take those visits to. Well, didn't take all of them, but obviously looked at Florida State. You got Florida in there, but it really does seem like when he obviously went to Ole Miss and a few others, but just the way that the vibes have been coming from Clarity, there has been given almost every indication as I'm losing reasons to not pick Washington. I'm trying to find if I'm in Clarity's shoes and I'm trying to play pro and con this. The pros, I might think, oh, that's a con. Oh, that's a pro. No, that's a pro too. And if the one con that people will say is, well, how is he going to go across the country? And what what if he's a late flip or whatever? And somebody else says that. Well, first of all, you're not going to take a kid if you're worried about him flipping late because that's just scared recruiting. And I think the work that Vinny Cincinnati has done, and the interesting thing with all this, it kind of parlays into my other job with this. He has a relationship with Seahawks cornerback Devon Witherspoon going back to their days coming out of Pensacola, Florida. And I think that's another thing to where Ladarian would have somebody up here in Seattle that he's familiar with, that has made the jump. Obviously, Devon went to Illinois, via Florida, but having somebody that he would recognize, I think that could, I'm not saying would play a factor in the recruitment, but I don't think it would necessarily hurt knowing that you're going to have somebody up there as a Florida kid who could maybe just teach you the ropes a little bit of how to just live in the Northwest and things like that. So that's a little small nugget to where I think it actually could, it wouldn't be a sealer, but that would also be another pro. Like, you know what? These are all too many good reasons. I'm going to Washington.
Sure. No, I really like your whole thought process there. And shout out to Pensacola, by the way. One of my college baseball teammates is from down there as well. Great little area. But I really like your whole thought process here. And I'm really intrigued to see if they can, in fact, get him. Because you're right. Vinny Cincinnati has done a wonderful job recruiting him and developing this relationship. And some people might say, oh, well, is it too little too late? But he offered before Florida State. He offered before a lot of these other schools where it feels like it's down to 3 from the 5 schools he's considering, and that would be Florida State, Ole Miss, and Washington. And it's tough because you don't want to just go out and say, oh, I think Washington can win that battle, because this is a top 200 ranked kid who is really impressive on film, man. His film is like borderline 5-star stuff. I feel if he was 2 inches taller and 15 pounds heavier, he had 40 plus offers. Like he would have had way, because he's got a Georgia offer, a Michigan offer. He's got all these big time offers, but he would have way more of those, or way more interest, I would say, from some of those bigger schools as well. And Georgia might have pushed harder for him. Michigan might have pushed harder for him, but doesn't matter. That isn't how it's worked out so far. And if he picks Washington, the staff has shown that it really has arrived. And I'd say the same thing about Ryland Dillard Allen, where this is another guy where you look at his size and you say, oh, he's listed at 5'11", 165. Like, why are you pushing so hard for a kid like that? And then you go and you look, he's got listed 4.29 40-yard dash. You watch his film and you say, oh yeah, no, that kid can play, whether it's nickel, whether it's safety. I love watching that kid play more than almost any other prospect in this class. Dylan Robinson probably is my favorite film that I watched so far, of not just the commits, but just most of the prospects that Washington has been in contention for as well. And just the more that I watch Ryland Dillard Allen, the more I think that, okay, yeah, no, this is a guy who's probably leaning Washington at this point in time. And just when you look at where he is in this process, but the more I watch him, I know I keep saying this, but the more I watch him, the more I just think this is a guy, if he's at 180 pounds, that he can come in and compete year one because of his athleticism, because of his size. And we talked about this the other day where, guys that we believe deserve 4th star, he would be on my list 100%. If he were to commit to Washington, I would say this dude needs a 4th star tomorrow. Like that's just the kind of film and the kind of talent that he has.
Which you would know because if he commits to Washington, we're locking his 3-star status. But that's neither here nor there, and I'll just leave it at that. But no, you're absolutely right. Okay. But to your point, this is a guy where I think it speaks to perfectly what Vinny Cincinnati and how Vinny Cincinnati recruits. Where I think honestly, he just has a list of probably 30 guys that he just goes through the tape and then just reshuffles the board. Says, okay, you know what? That's the guy I want. He just doesn't even look at the rankings, doesn't look at anything, doesn't even. I don't honestly think he looks at location. I think he looks at location before he books the. He looks at location before he books the flight to go for a visit down there. But other than that, he basically goes where the talent is, where he's seen Illinois, Florida, Arizona, Washington. Dude covered the four corners in this class. Alabama. Dude covered the four corners in this class in less than 6 months. And that to me, and that's why I was so high on Vinny Cincinnati as a recruiter, because when you're coming with an NFL background, does he have the greatest coaching pedigree? Personally, no, but his family does. And I think that's why this was the bet of, he's going to know how to recruit. He's going to know how to develop guys. And I think that's why you're seeing some of these high 4-star guys consider Washington. Is I don't think last year, and this is no slight to Chuck Morrell or Juice Brown, but Washington would not have been in play for these guys and certainly at this point in the process. But that's why you go and get NFL coaches, and then you have an NFL defensive coordinator to set everything up. And that's why this is going to work out perfectly. When I went to the Mariners game over the weekend and I bumped into a security guard, shout out, Ben, thank you for being it every day, or you were a great guy. You are a great guy. This is why I tell fans, hey, look, this is a reason to believe in the staff. These guys know how to build. They know how to recruit. 24 is going to be what it is. It's going to be a retooling year of sorts where you're 8-4, 9-3, which is exactly what Ben agreed with me on. And I think next year that goes into why when you're 25 and 26, that's why you're loading up on all this 4-star talent. Whereas it took Jed 2 years at Arizona to get this same level of talent. And then in year three, year three comes along and he gets the 10 wins. Jed's getting a head start on top of the 24 head start where you got DeMond, Jordan Washington, and all these other guys. I'm really excited to see how this class comes together at Washington.
I couldn't agree with you more. And one last thing, as you mentioned the previous staff, it kind of shows that Kalen made a late push for Ryland Dillard Allen. He kind of saw, this is a guy that, maybe Alabama needs. And I feel if he does commit to Washington, that would feel pretty good for some Husky fans to just kind of get that victory on the recruiting trail. And Lars, with that being said, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We've got so much great stuff coming for you throughout the next couple of weeks. Is camp is right here. It's time. You've made it basically through the off season. So make sure you're subscribed with all the latest news, everything that we've got coming at you. Get us subscribed wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere, updating the channel with new content every single day. So make sure to like the video, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you got any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.